New York has now a socialist mayor, a mayor who believes in state-run grocery stores and who thinks that Israel is an apartheid state that is committing genocide. Now, how bad is this development? Why did Zohran Mamdani win? And what does it mean for the future of politics in America? Is this Mamdani style of populism the answer of the Democratic Party to Trump and to MAGA? These are some of the questions that we will be discussing in the Ayn Rand Institute podcast today with my colleague Onkar Ghate. And Onkar, the first question that comes to mind is this as bad as it looks? Because I've also heard the view that says that, look, people, why don't we all calm down? This is just New York. Mamdani was just a charismatic candidate with a captivating smile. He got lucky because his opponents were incompetent or allegedly corrupt. So maybe he's a one-off thing. So is he a one-off thing, Onkar? Or do you think he's a trend that should worry us because something really bad is happening here?
I don't think he's a one-off trend. One can make too much, like how many people follow who's the mayor of New York City and think, oh, well, the country's doomed if you have a bad mayor of New York City. So in that sense, you can make too much of it if you're thinking like the country is doomed now. But it is significant, and I think it is part of a trend that you've got Mamdani elected. And I think the important thing, the first thing to say about him is he's evil. Like the positions that he takes are evil, and he was elected not because he hid his positions, but he was open about what his positions are. And I would put to encapsulate like how bad they are, I would put three things. It's the sort of condemnation of Israel after October 7th, but I think much worse than that is the sympathies towards Hamas. That when you watch him, I watched the Fox News interview where they ask, well, will you condemn Hamas? And he goes out of his way to not condemn them, to say, well, I'm just going to be, if he wins the election, he's just going to be a mayor of New York City. Why does a mayor of New York City has to weigh in on foreign policy? But in that same interview, and like 2 minutes or something between that, they ask, well, will you arrest Netanyahu because he's convicted into International Criminal Court, which the U.S. doesn't recognize? Oh, yes, then he would arrest Netanyahu. So all of a sudden, the facade of, well, I'm not, why are you asking me about foreign policy questions? He'll answer. And it's not, he doesn't beat around the bush. He answers that question. So that kind of sympathy for outright killers, dictators who the first and foremost who they kill are Palestinians. They want to kill Israel, but it's easier for them to kill Palestinians and control Palestinians, which Hamas did and does when it seizes power. So that I think should be a disqualifier in American politics. You should not be able to win office if that's your position. But it's not only that. You have the socialism, and he's a die-hard socialist. He's a part of the Democratic Socialist of America. And that whole group people are leaving that group because of how pro-Hamas that group is, and he's not distancing himself from that. And the promise of free stuff to New Yorkers, what does that mean? That means, free means like you have to put it in scare quotes, free. It means I'm going to give it stuff to some people and take it away, and his demonizing of the most productive people in New York City do we really need billionaires? So we need to tax them. I'm going to increase taxes on them. And I would like to tax them out of existence. So that's the socialist Christian slogan, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And that he really wants to implement that politically. And then there's a real authoritarian bent to all of, unsurprising if you're sympathetic to Hamas and socialism. And for instance, the cozying up with Lena Khan and putting her on her transition team. She's one of the worst people in American politics today, an outright authoritarian. When she was using the antitrust to go after the social media companies, and she's on record about in the transition, we're looking for all the ways and sort of loopholes in the laws to wield executive power, more executive power, and exactly in the way that's being done for the Trump administration now. They want to do that for the mayor of New York City. And like you put those three together, you've got someone whose positions are really, really evil.
And one way, Onkar, that a litmus test for me when I judge someone, a public figure, is first and foremost, are they honest on their beliefs? Whether the beliefs are good or bad, this is a good question. Like, are you honest with us? And I think it was in the same interview that someone asked him about, in the past, you've been linked to the slogan that says, globalize the Intifada. And what do you think about this slogan? Now, again, obviously, if we know some history, the Intifada was a wave of terror campaign by the Palestinians, including things like blowing themselves up in school buses and attacking random Israelis. And instead of giving an answer that says, yes, that's who I am, I'm in favor of this, or in saying, no, I condemn it, he danced around it. He says, well, sometimes the language of the oppressed, it's about justice. So he didn't give a direct answer. And I thought this is such a cowardice and such undermining the intelligence of his viewers. Imagine what we would think if someone who believes in, the supremacy of the Aryan race would say, yeah, I said that Sieg Heil is it's not necessarily a Nazi slogan. It technically means Hail Victory, so it's not that bad. We would say, A, this person not only has despicable ideas, but B, he doesn't even stand for his ideas. He thinks we are crazy. So, everyone says, oh, this guy is charismatic. He has this beautiful smile. I see someone who is, in a way, double evil. A, he has evil ideas, but B, he's not even honest enough to portray these evil ideas. And it's not that he became more moderate because he won. It would be one thing to say, yeah, as young, I was stupid. I mean, I had probably worse views than he had when I was younger. But he hasn't changed his views. He didn't say, this was stupid talk. He just didn't want to answer because he has something to hide. And when something has something to hide, it is not good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You can put it like this, so you said it's not that he changed his mind. So it's not that he's more open and saying, well, I changed my mind. It's that he's more cautious about telling you what he really thinks because he's trying to win the election and gain the popularity. And that's the other thing I think that's important in terms of thinking about his election, that I think you put this in your intro, that he's a populist. So in part, his kind of position is the system's corrupt and it needs to be torn down. He's tried to distance himself or sort of tiptoe around the defund the police issue. But when you look at his past statements, there's many about we've got to defund the police. This is the kind of thing we've got to tear down the system. And so the populists run against, there's sort of a corrupt leadership, corrupt elites. There's sort of people who think of themselves as entitled to power, and we need to tear that down. And in that sense, so we're talking about it as a trend or so. We're seeing the rise of populism in America, and we're seeing it around the world. Trump is that phenomenon, and Mamdani is that. And I think here, it's not that Americans are super susceptible to this, but when a populist is running against people who are easily painted as corrupt elites, it opens a door for them. And if you think of Trump versus Hillary Clinton, part of Hillary Clinton's whole image was, I'm entitled now to be president. I've put in the years of public work. I've been Secretary of State. My husband's been president. I've worked and now it's my turn. And there was a real projection of that. And that you had Trump come in and say, well, we've got the system's corrupt and so on. We've got to drain the swamp. That had some plausibility. And even then, the election was a tightrope. I mean, it was very, very close. But, and Kamala Harris projected some of that too, and sort of that she was with the elites in a different kind of way, like with the university administrations and so on. And Trump but someone as pathetic as Joe Biden beat Trump. So it's not like it's 90% of the population or something is susceptible to populists. And with Mamdani, Cuomo and Adams both come across as corrupt elites. especially Cuomo. And what he was corrupt as governor. And the kind of things around COVID, the nursing home. I don't know if you follow that, but I follow some of it. The nursing home. I mean, it's a little more than a scandal. People died, and the sort of pretending cover up. Like it's corrupt. So you've got a person who feels like a fresh face. He's young, and it's that dynamic worked. But I've seen some of the polling, and I've talked to people who are, I don't know if you know about like the financial markets that do betting, the predictive markets. If a semi-decent candidate was running against Mamdani, the direction was that he would lose. So that's relevant to thinking about the trends.
Yes, and something about populism, Onkar, because many people mistake. They think populism means you're very likable and charismatic to the masses. So for me, populism is I tell the people whatever they want to hear, knowing very well that I'm kidding them, knowing very well that I'm bamboozling them. So, and this is my estimation. I know many people don't say it, but for me, for example, the president of the Javier Milei in Argentina is not a populist. He's very much, good with the masses, but he comes with a program. He comes with some particular ideas. And it's like, these are my ideas. You like it or not, this is what you're going to get for me. What we have with Mamdani, and definitely also with Trump, is people who are saying, I'm going to suggest something that I myself probably know it does not work. I don't think for a second that Mamdani believes that he's going to bring free buses, which are actually going to be also fast buses, or that he will freeze the rent. He has to know that these things don't work, and yet he promises them. And if you want to understand what it means to be a populist, go on YouTube and find one of his early videos that I think literally the day after Trump won, because he's asking people, why did you vote for Trump, or why didn't you vote? And anything that people would tell them is, oh yes, so if I do that, then will you vote for me? And people say, oh yes, of course. So he would ask someone, why didn't you vote? They say, oh, because I don't like the genocide. Oh, so if someone stands against the genocide, would you vote? Yes. Or this is how he came up with, your groceries are expensive. So what if I make your groceries cheaper? So this is the sign of a populism. And we're not here to give predictions. I just think that there is a tendency building up, which is that the left will more and more move away from what we have in our mind as woke, because this has a ceiling. It can't go very far. And instead, they will go full into this MAGA recipe of, let's go full on. Let's promise everything to everyone. Let's make sure that we scapegoat the 1%, the billionaires, or Israel. And let's appeal to the lowest common denominator, and this is how we're going to win. So take away from this, a populist is not someone who is good with the masses, is someone who knows that what he's promising is absolute BS. And a question to you, Onkar. If someone is a populist, does it mean that he's not a real socialist? So is the fact that Mamdani is a populist, who will say anything to people, is this good news for us? Because maybe, at the end of the day, he's not too ideological. Maybe he's not too intellectual. Is this a silver lining?
I don't think it is a silver lining. I suspect with him, he believes many of the things in the way that, how old is he? 32 or 35, something like that. In the way that kind of person often believes that it's not that thought through. It's not coming from a lot of experience. He can do some real harm in New York City, but as you said, there's things that he's not going to be able to do. I mean, that's part of, in terms of like he's promising people things. It's like the mayor doesn't have the power to do all these kinds of things that all the things that he's promising, and that's an indication that he's just promising people because it's what they want to hear. But the dynamic goes both ways. So I think he is an authoritarian. And that part of populism is that the executive branch should have more and more power. We don't need the niceties of law and legislation, and we don't need the niceties of the courts. So we should be able to do what we want, and that's part of what you're promising the people. It's you've been held in check by these elite and institutions, often like the legislature, like the courts. We need to bypass that if you're going to have your say and have power. So part of what they're doing is a real concentration of power in the executive branch. And I think that is, I mean, insofar as like we're talking about municipal politics, though, I mean, New York City is a huge engine of productivity in America with a huge budget. So it's not like some rinky-dink city, but it's still, you're talking about a municipal power. But it's that mentality of wanting more and more power. And as I say, like having someone like Lina Khan going out of your way to put him on your, that's an indication of what they're after is power. And it used to be in America. So this is, I think, a disturbing trend in America. It used to be when the population would get the scent of a power luster, that would be a problem for the power luster. That it is, we can't have power concentrated in the hands of government, and particular in one figure, in a leader. And here you have it. It's too much. A leader will save us. I wrote about this right after the 2016 election, in an article called "One Small Step for Dictatorship." I said one of the most disturbing signs about the population was the polling where they were asked, do you support, or does America need a strong leader who will do anything to save us? And it was a majority of Americans who strongly agreed. And if you add strongly and somewhat agreed, it was like 80%. And that's when you're wanting a savior, that's disturbing politically, because nothing good comes from concentrating power into the hands of the executive.
Yeah, that's usually what happens in countries like Greece, for example, which are countries that are basket cases. That you have people who promise, you expect from a savior, which in other words means you expect that someone is going to run your life and the state is going to some way fix things, which is obviously it's why the countries that believe in this model are where they are. I mean, look at Latin America. Now, Onkar, we can't predict things. We don't know if Mamdani is going to actually do the things he promised, but we can see where the wind blows and we can see where intellectually the country is going. So I'm going to tell you some thoughts and you tell me whether you agree. So I predict that there will be more Mamdanis in the future, both from the left and from the right. And here's why. We see that both parties in the United States, they're less ideological and less intellectual. What does this mean? It means they rely less and less on ideas, on a particular program, and more in opposing the other side, opposing the other party, opposing the other team, so to speak. So they're more like two fighting tribes, two fighting gangs. But this means that there are not any more intellectual standards in terms of what it means to be a Democrat or what it means to be a Republican, in terms of policies, for example, or general principles. So there is not any more much intellectual gatekeeping happening. I mean, we see this on the right? There's this supposedly big umbrella, and somehow Tucker Carlson can fit there, maybe Candace Owens, and why not lately also Nick Fuentes? I mean, as long as you hate the left, you're in this umbrella apparently. Now, add to this already very bad mix, add this rise of low attention span social media campaigns, where this is how Mamdani actually came to prominence out of nowhere. So this is how politicians who are completely, or figures who are outsiders, can very quickly become a sensation. Because again, no intellectual standards, no gatekeeping. So through social media and all that stuff, somehow you can find a Mamdani or a Nick Fuentes in the central political stage in one way or the other. And this also happened actually with Trump 10 years ago. Now, here's the thing, which makes it even worse. Every new such sensational candidate raises the bar a bit higher, or maybe lower, for what you need to face him. So now you need more appeals to emotionalism, more bombastic tribal stuff. And here's the weird thing, Onkar, that decent people from both sides, we hear this all the time that, oh, the other side is so crazy that if only we present a semi-decent face, we'll definitely win. It's actually what you said about the predictions in New York, that if there was a semi-decent candidate, he would have beaten Mamdani. And yet, it's like these two sides drag each other deeper and deeper towards the abyss. So after Trump, it's like, imagine someone who is hooked on, I don't know, something like cocaine. You cannot give them coffee. Now they need something even more stimulating. So where I'm getting with all this, if this continues, we could find ourselves in a nightmare situation where the choice is, on the one hand, a Tucker Carlson or, who knows, a Nick Fuentes one day, and then on the other side, a Mamdani or an AOC. That's the nightmare scenario. The better scenario is, well, as someone would say, we saw this also in the 60s. At some point, the radical left looks like they would dominate the Democratic Party, but society gave them the boot, and soon things were back to normal. So are we into this downward spiral towards worse and worse politicians, worse and worse public and intellectual figures, or will somehow the system balance itself out? Because these parties are mostly machines of power, and they will realize, look, if we put a moderate face, we're going to have an easier path towards power.
I think it's still something to be seen, but are we on a downward spiral? I think, and part of what you just spelled out is, yeah, that's what the downward spiral looks like. And we are, 15 years ago, people, and that's not that long a time political. 15 years ago, people would have said, no, there's no way somebody like Trump could win the presidency. And I think 15 years ago, they would have said a socialist, like an out and out, like open socialist, so anti Israel and pro Hamas, they couldn't win the mayor of New York City. And yet you fast forward 15, 20 years and they have. So that's part of what a downward spiral looks like. It's not inevitable, but I think it's important to not just paint it as it's the leadership or the leadership of these political parties. They're responding, unfortunately, they're responding to something in the population. And so the population in comparison to the 60s and people in the 50s and 60s were already bemoaning the lack of education, the lack of knowledge on the part of the population. But here, if you think, there was considerable support from young people, from Mamdani, for instance. And I think they are ignorant of socialism, of the history of socialism. They're ignorant of the Israel nation, its creation after World War II, its history, and they're ignorant of the surrounding dictatorships and worse around Israel. So that makes it doesn't justify what they're doing. It doesn't even give them a full excuse, but it makes it more understandable how someone could be like, after October 7th, you think people are turning not on Hamas, they're turning on Israel. Like, how is that possible? And yet, if they're not, and it's not just ignorance, they've been miseducated about all of this. So the population is also less intellectual, is more anti-intellectual, is more tribal. And so the part of it that they want leaders tells you that they can't think as well for themselves. They don't see themselves as independent, and they don't see themselves as holding ideas and principles. So it's I want someone who's going to represent my gang or my tribe or my ethnicity. And this has been so pushed on the population, on the American people, from the universities, but also from, if you're thinking of the support for the Republicans, by religion and by the church. Not every church is, but that you've got a rise, and it really is a rise of white Christian nationalism in the U.S. It's not like there's some leader. There's a base for this, and that's the sense, I think, in which it really is a downward spiral, because this anti-intellectuality runs not just like some leaders or political parties. It runs, unfortunately, throughout American society right now.
And just a comment here. So, because I'm sure some people already in the audience get triggered by you mentioning the other side, right? So you're both siding, they were going to say. And a couple of weeks ago, you had a very good episode with our colleague Ben on this issue, like why both sides. So here's a thought experiment for anyone who might felt that we were unjust to both sides. Let's say we take the key ideas of Tucker Carlson and we ask ChatGPT or Grok, without telling them whose these ideas are, hey, these are the key principles of this guy. Would you say he's right or left? I'm sure that if we run this experiment 10 times, the result will be 60-40. One time it will say, oh, he's probably on the left, the other on the right. I mean, think about it. We need to protect the working class of the United States against automation, against big business, against, don't ally yourself with Israel. So that's why we're saying that the two sides, indeed, they're in fierce competition with each other, but this is not based on ideas. It's a competition based on we are not what they are, although they're sharing many of the key ideas. Not to go even a step further, more abstract ideas like what's the role of the state, what's the situation, what should be the relationship between the individual and the states. But something else on education, what you said, that I think that as a society, we're getting exactly what we deserve based on the education system we have. And Mamdani's victory was an unmistaken exhibit of this. So you said that he got the support of young people. Let's make it a bit more specific. More than 60% of young people voted for Mamdani. And based on some other polls, this was 75%, based on which group you examine. And we also know that something like 60% of university graduates voted for Mamdani. And I think in women, this was something like 80+%. Notice, not graduates of humanities, not people who studied gender studies, of all university graduates. And Mamdani fits with this identity and the vibe of the leftist university graduate. And there was this commentator who said something like, we're about to be governed by, how did she put it, the Columbia University student body. Like, these are now our masters. And indeed, this is what we see happening. Now, I'll try to give the more innocent explanation of what's happening, which is, look, these are young people who pay high rent. They don't have affordable groceries. So that's actually the problem. Not that it's that these young people are ready for socialism and for authoritarianism, but they just want affordable rent. So again, the question here is it as bad as it looks?
So I do think that is part of the motivation, and a substantial part of the motivation for many young people, but it still is an indictment of our education system, because these are real problems. Like, for sure, housing in the US, but really in the Western world, or a lot of the Western world, is a huge problem. But the solution is not socialism. It's not freeze rents or make rents free. And there's going to be that kind of proposal, just as like make universities free. There's going to be make housing free. So that's not a solution. It's exacerbating the problem. So that they can't think, among other things, they have really no economic knowledge, but really it's negative economic knowledge. So everything that they believe about economics is wrong. It's not true. So part of being raised on these kind of socialist ideas, most of them are not card-carrying socialists, and they tend, as they get into the workforce and start to own property, including like housing, a house or an apartment, they come to see what they've been taught in school. So much of it is wrong and BS. But if they're not getting jobs and they're finding it really difficult to they don't learn from the market what there is to be learned about how this really works and why private property is needed, enormously beneficial to the individual. And it doesn't matter, not just the billionaires. Like, that's complete BS. That as a person of moderate income, that you don't want private property, you don't want a free society and a free economy. But that's like, they don't have any knowledge of the operations of a capitalist system. Indeed, they have negative knowledge. And so they think, oh, well, maybe this is a solution. So there are real problems here, but the problems, I mean, in New York City, everybody knows that housing is a result, the problems with housing is a result of rent control. And what he's proposing is further controls along the lines of rent controls by freezing rents. And that's going to exacerbate the problem. But an education system would have armed them against these kinds of populist promises of knowing, like, this is, yeah, we don't want someone like this. And that's the sense in which, though it's wrong to think of them as, well, they're all communists or something like that, or even all socialists. They are a product of the educational system, and the educational system is producing tribalists.
And to make it even worse, some months ago, before the agreement when the agreement for the ceasefire in Gaza was on the table, there was an opinion poll according to which 1 in 3 Gen Zs were actually opposed to Hamas releasing the hostages. I'll repeat this because when I read it, I couldn't believe it. 1 in 3 young people thought that Hamas should not release the hostages, should not take the deal. So this didn't happen because of high rent. This didn't happen because the grocery store is expensive. This happens because these people are trained in moral degeneracy, because you have to be trained for such a critical mass of people to get so morally degenerate as to want Hamas to keep the hostages. So of course these people have free will, they should have figured it out themselves. This doesn't dissolve them of responsibility, but also it shows how horrible and how bad the education system is that not produces but helps to people to form such views. So for the end, Onkar, I haven't got anything particularly optimist to put on the table. I shouldn't be the I told you so guys, but we told you so with Ben some months ago. We did an episode which explained why conservatives misunderstand Mamdani and the likes of Mamdani. They misunderstand socialism. They actually use the same, they have some of the same moral views that Mamdani is selling to people, that, yeah, you know, you have to sacrifice. Those who have need to sacrifice for the have-nots. They have this stupid idea that the problem with Mamdani is that these things are impractical, but otherwise they're good in theory. So if you don't know how to fight Mamdani, and if you cannot defend the hill of the moral high ground, then you will keep losing. And one more thing, the reaction cannot just be Mamdani is horrible. The reaction needs to be that we have something positive to offer, a positive view, a positive alternative, a positive vision on how life can be better. And this will include everything from, you know, what it means to have a moral view on the world, and how the economy can be much, much, much better. We shouldn't be discussing about, why is my rent so expensive? We should be discussing about where are the technological leaps forward that we could be having. And where is this positive vision? As long as it's not there, we're stuck with the Mamdanis, and on the other hand, these figures that are now dominating the other side of the spectrum. So no positive parting words from me, Onkar, but what about you?
Yeah, let me say something positive here, and it relates to the both sides issue of why you're bringing up both sides. Why can't you just condemn Mamdani? There are not just two sides here. That is tribal thinking. That's your immediate reaction. Like, well, why are you running down our side? It's like there's two tribes locked in war. That's what we have to get out of. And there's an opportunity to get out of it for a competent and just like these, doesn't even have to be charismatic. I think just decent political figure, more likely, I think, to come on the Democrat side than the Republican side, but it could come from either, of someone who's trying to get away from the tribalism and seeing the commonality to what at least is some of the base of the Democratic Party, and is certainly the base now of the Republican Party, and to say the bases are the same and corrupt. They're both tribal. And the tribalists know this. So one of the things in the voting is Mamdani you can see as sort of an heir to Bernie Sanders. There's and AOC and Bernie Sanders project like he endorsed Mamdani and projects like, yeah, I'm whatever, he's 80 something. This is sort of the future. They're carrying on my legacy of a socialist, and I think like there's a reason to think of it like that. And many voters understand that they can switch from Bernie Sanders to Trump. Take like a very prominent Joe Rogan was Bernie Sanders, and then it was, and that makes perfect sense to me. I latched onto one tribal leader, and now maybe not. I'll latch onto another tribal leader. He's in search of. I don't have a high opinion, like sort of him intellectually. So it's in search of a tribal leader. AOC did some social media thing after the election of why were there so many people who voted for me and for Trump? And these are populists saying we need to tear down the system. And the tribalists understand that that's what I'm looking for. And it's not about ideas. And so you can think, well, she's on the left, right? No, they're tribalists and that. But a lot of Americans don't want that, are sick of it on both sides. And if you had a political figure who's saying, I'm not going to play to the bait. Now, it's very hard to do this, I think, to rise in either party, and I'm not playing to the base. But someone like Shapiro in Pennsylvania, I think if he ran and he would have beat Trump, I think, if he had run, because he comes across as a common sense, decent, non-tribalist person. And if you had somebody like that, I think they still have a chance politically. And this is what, like, if you ever see figures like that, I think it's really important to support them. And it doesn't matter, oh, they're Democrats, that's the wrong tribe. Or so. It's if you see someone who's not tribal and trying to do something politically, support that, because that's what we need. And I think there still is, certainly in America, there's still openings for those political figures.
So here's a not so pessimist message at the end. This was the Ayn Rand Institute podcast. Thank you very much for your time.